Today on this bonus episode of the Perception and Action podcast, a look at the role of demonstration and imitation in motor learning. What is a rate enhancer in skill acquisition? So it's time for a call to action. Hi everyone, this is Rob Gray from Arizona State University and PerceptionAction.com. Welcome to the Perception and Action podcast, where I discuss how psychological research can be applied to improving performance, accelerating skill acquisition, and designing technologies. In this episode, I want to look at a couple studies on the general topic of observational learning. What is the real value of a coach demonstrating a skill to a new learner? Should it be done early or late in training? Should you let the athlete attempt to imitate the movement themselves while they're watching? Let's have a look. As I discussed back in episode 20, observational learning is generally accepted as a very effective and powerful coaching tool. However, research shows that demonstrations to an athlete can actually vary quite substantially in their effectiveness. Factors that seem to matter include whether the demonstration by the instructor portrays a clear strategy for action, and whether or not the skill requires a new coordination pattern to be learned. Another issue that has been put open to question is when does demonstration have an effect? And consequently, when should it be employed? Many have argued that the real benefit is that it can have almost an immediate effect on performance in the first few trials after viewing the demo, in a way that things like verbal cueing cannot. But is this actually the case? The possibility of having an almost immediate effect on motor learning brings up a concept that I haven't talked about much on the podcast yet: rate enhancers. In motor learning, we're generally only concerned with the long-term benefits of a particular training method. As I've said many times, we need to distinguish short-term benefits that we might see in practice, what we typically call performance changes, from changes in behavior that are retained long-term and are transferable to competition, what we call learning. But many have also argued that there could be benefits of training interventions that accelerate skill acquisition in the short term, regardless of their long-term benefits. With respect to demonstration and observational learning, it has been argued that viewing an appropriate demo early in training may put the learner in a better position to receive further guidance and instruction from the coach as compared to those that have not. So the idea here is that the short-term acceleration in the rate of performance improvement might interact with other elements of training to result in better overall learning in the long run. An idea similar to this was proposed by Scully and Newell in 1985. They argue that observing a model would have its greatest effects early on because it would speed the rate at which the learner assembles a new movement topology, what Newell refers to as the process of coordination, and allow them to more quickly advance to the next stage of skill development, where the main focus is parameterization of the movement pattern, what Newell calls control. Another way of thinking about this is that the demonstration makes it such that the learner has to spend less time broadly searching for a movement solution and can spend more time working on refining that solution. In Newell's terminology, it accelerates the shift from coordination to control. So again, the idea here is looking short-term rather than long-term. By enhancing the rate of acquisition, we can use practice time more efficiently at earlier stages of learning. Another concept related to this idea is the soft assembly, first proposed by Kelso and Zanone. A soft assembly is a temporary movement solution that is very imprecise and clunky, but it allows the learner to achieve some initial progress. This solution is eventually discarded when the learner becomes more experienced. A good example of a soft assembly might be Bernstein's idea of freezing degrees of freedom. The effective demonstration on the early stages of motor learning was investigated in a study by Horn and colleagues in 2007. The main questions of interest were 1. Does demonstration serve to constrain the movement solution adopted by the learner, accelerating the coordination phase as predicted by Newell? And 2, are these effects only temporary, as predicted by the idea of the soft assembly? To investigate these questions, the authors asked 16 participants to learn a novel throwing movement. Imagine executing a baseball pitch, except that you have to release the ball backhanded, like you're slapping someone in the face with the back of your hand. Before the pretest, all participants were instructed that the task was to throw the ball for maximum speed, ensuring that the ball hit the target. 3 additional task constraints were then described. First, they were told that the back of the hand should face the target until ball release. Second, they were informed that they were free to move how they wanted as long as they did not step over the line placed on the floor. Third, to prevent underarm throwing, the participants were told that the ball should be released from a position in which the wrist was located above the height of the elbow. After 3 pretest trials, participants were split evenly into 2 groups, the control group and the model group. The control group kept practicing the throwing tasks based on the verbal instructions I just described. The model group watched a life-size projection of a video of 5 demonstrations of a model executing the throw. The main point of interest was what occurred in the acquisition phase, where the 2 groups differed. Both the ball speed and the movement kinematics were measured. What was found? In terms of performance, the model group showed an immediate, significant increase in ball speed over the first 3 trials after observing the model. There were no changes in speed after this immediate boost. The control group showed no significant change in ball speed throughout the acquisition phase, so clear, immediate benefit of the demonstration on performance. In terms of kinematics, the measurement of the relative motion of the limbs revealed that the model group immediately, again within the first 3 trials, changed their throwing motion to more closely resemble the movement pattern of the model, as compared to what the control group did. This movement pattern was maintained throughout the rest of the acquisition trials. By contrast, the control group showed no significant change in their coordination pattern. So in other words, searching on their own, they did not find the movement solution that was used by the model. In sum, it seems like the main effect is that observing the demonstration seemed to immediately constrain the model group's coordination, most likely shifting it into a different, and based on the ball speed results, more optimal location in the perceptual motor workspace. So demonstration does appear to be a rate enhancer for skill acquisition, in particular in terms of the coordination phase. By accelerating the acquisition of a new movement pattern through demonstration, the learner can parameterize a technically appropriate movement pattern with less practice trials. Furthermore, the fact that participants in the model group kept their movement solution for the rest of the trials suggests that it may not just be an ineffective, temporary soft assembly that is going to be discarded later, but may be a rather relatively stable change in behavior. The second question I want to look at today is, what should a learner be doing when they're observing a model? Should they try to imitate the movement, do their own version of the movement, or is it better to do nothing at all and just watch? Does this depend on skill level? We know that when experienced athletes observe a model, it activates brain areas that are involved in producing the same movement themselves. One way that we can demonstrate this is that experts are much better at predicting the outcome of another person executing an action than novices are. It is presumably the motor simulation of actions within one's own motor system that gives this advantage. But would trying to imitate the movement while observing, which would of course cause its own activity in the motor areas of the brain, serve to enhance or interfere with this process? This question was addressed in a recent study by Lanegan and colleagues. 12 experienced basketball players and 12 non-playing college students were asked to make outcome prediction judgments while watching videos. Specifically, they watched a video of a player making a free throw that was occluded partway through and were asked to indicate whether the shot was in, long, or short. All participants did this under 4 different conditions in a within-subjects design. In the observation condition, participants predicted the shot outcomes while passively watching the video. In the other 3 conditions, participants were required to execute simple hand movements concurrently with watching the video. In the incongruent action condition, participants executed a right wrist flexion movement at their maximum speed, so something you would never actually do while making a free throw. In the imitative motion condition, they executed a right wrist flexion as if imitating the model's action. Finally, in the self-motion condition, they executed their right wrist flexion as if they were taking a free throw themselves. What was found? Consistent with previous studies, in the passive observation condition, the skilled group could judge the shot outcome more accurately than the novices. But what happened when they were required to move? For the skilled group, the accuracy of outcome judgments declined significantly in the self-motion and incongruent conditions as compared to the passive observation condition. There was no significant difference for the imitation condition. In contrast, accuracy in the less skilled group was significantly facilitated in the imitative motion condition as compared to all other conditions. The authors argue that having the novices imitate the movement effectively achieves what experts are doing when they just passively observe. That is, motor simulation involving brain areas that produce the movements themselves. These findings suggest that we do need to take into account what an athlete is doing when watching a demonstration of a movement technique. For lesser skilled performers, having them attempt to imitate the movement while watching may be another potential rate enhancer for skill acquisition, particularly if we're doing something like anticipation training. While for more experienced athletes, it seems best to have them just passively watch the demo. Okay, that's it for this month's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a million for supporting the podcast. I really appreciate it and it really helps a lot. This is Rob Gray from ASU. Cheers for now and keep them coupled.
Is this the way?